Hello and welcome to a rather crowded shed. Today's story is the feeding of the 5,000. And we find it in John chapter 6. It's the only miracle that's recorded in all four of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So it's a very significant miracle. John chapter 6, reading from verse 1. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the miraculous signs that he had performed on the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover feast was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for all these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, this is verse 7, Philip answered him, 8 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up, "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and the men sat down, about 5,000 of them. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the miraculous sign that Jesus did, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who has come into the world." And we end the reading at verse 14. Amazing miracle. But it's that verse 7 that I'd like to come back to. Philip answers him when Jesus said, "How are we going to feed these people?" Although he knew. Philip says, 8 months' wages, considerable amount of money, would not buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. It's that word "enough" there, and it's in the negative, isn't it? It's a very, very strong negative word. We wouldn't have enough to feed this crowd. And even when Andrew comes and he says, "Well, there's a boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish," but that's not enough. What's that going to do for the crowd this size? And the negative of those 2 verses there most probably reflected the mood of the people as well. You know, they were in a remote place now. It was late in the day. They were hungry. They'd had enough, perhaps. Enough is enough. Whether they had been sick, whether they felt lost, whether they were tired, they'd had enough. They'd had enough. And even the disciples perhaps had had enough, because they came away to have a good rest. And now here they are in the midst of a great crowd of people again. They'd had enough. They hadn't even had time to eat in their previous mission. But now they'd had enough. But Jesus takes this small lunch that the boy had, and in his hands he created enough, in a positive sense. He created enough to feed 5,000. And we come to that great verse 12. When they had all had enough to eat, not just a bite, but they were full. They were satisfied. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted." So they gathered 12 baskets. It was more than enough. More than enough. So the negativeness of the story in the beginning, we haven't got enough, turns into a glorious positive. Oh, there's more than enough in the hands of Jesus, because he is the creator. In his hands things are created. In his hands things are multiplied, and the need is met. Later on, of course, he explains the significance of this sign. He says, I am that bread that came down from heaven. I am the bread of life. In me there is life. Wonderful, isn't it? You know, Jesus hasn't changed at all since that story. He's still the same today. He still looks out, and as Luke puts it so beautifully, he welcomes the crowd. He still welcomes us. He is still more than enough for whatever our need is, whether it's a sickness or whether it's a sense of feeling lost and we need a shepherd, or whether it's a sense of just being hungry and upset. Jesus is more than enough. And he bids us come to him. He welcomes us to come to him. And he can change our negativity. All those negatives, he can change them into glorious positives, because he is the great creator. He created all the grain in the fields. He created all the fish in the sea. There's nothing too difficult for him. I close with the words of that lovely Welsh hymn writer, William Williams of Pantycelyn, that great hymn. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, bread of heaven, feed me now and evermore. God bless you. Amen.